Welcome to the Struggle Series podcast with your host, Anthony Corelli.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Struggle Series podcast. I am your host, Anthony Corelli, and yes, it has been a very long time since I talked to you last. So much going on in the world, so much going on in our personal lives, but more importantly, just a much needed break, just from life in general, but definitely from, putting out this content. It does take a toll. And so we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But I just want to thank you if you are still sticking around. I know some of you have reached out and wondering if there's going to be more episodes, what happened to the other podcast, that type of thing. So let's spend a few minutes talking about that before we jump to tonight's episode. First things first. Life gets very hectic, at different times for different people, and that definitely happened for us. But I think the biggest reason for the break in the podcast was simply some spiritual attack, honestly, that we were going through, that I was going through. I think in an effort to not sound like a baby, but definitely to be transparent, when you help people who are struggling with demons, demons don't like that, right? I mean, you can see that when you put out a post, like if you put out a post on social media and demons will attack you, the demons in people will attack you, or people who are demonic, however you want to word that, will come after you. So you can imagine if a family or a couple or a person reaches out for help and you try to help them, sometimes the demons come after you. Definitely we try to stay prayed up, and we try to, even pray well before and after, conversations we have with people. But, sometimes demons, make a concerted effort to come after those who are trying to help, as well as the people that are asking for help. And so we had a season of life where we had to kind of wrestle through some of that. And it actually sometimes takes a little bit of time to diagnose that. But once you do, you pray, you work through it. And so here we are. And so I appreciate you sticking around and kind of being patient as we get to this. Now, the second thing I want to cover tonight is the new format. In light of the fact that we got a significant break in between, finishing the Cabal, ending the other podcast, we had a lot of time to pray and kind of make some decisions. And what we wanted to do was basically start like fresh and take some short stories and put them into a kind of a messaging format. Let me explain to you what that means. What we are going to do going forward is a couple of times a month, we're going to release an episode. And the episode is going to be a short story. Woven into the short story is a lesson on how demons attach to, interact with, torment, or even deeper, possess people in real life. Now, what do I mean by real life? Most of the information that we get regarding demons comes from movies. And let's be honest, there's some great horror movies out there if you're in it for the entertainment. But if you're in it for the education, you're getting these exaggerated, stories because, if a movie just kind of made it true to life, it may not be as entertaining or shocking. Sometimes it could be, but rarely would that be the case. And so what we are trying to do is give a more accurate depiction by writing a story with a little bit of flavor to it, maybe a little bit of flair, but definitely things that actually happen. So people who are listening, people who may stumble upon this, some of you have a lot of experience in this realm and some of you don't, but it'll help you understand what it actually looks like to be under the influence of a demon, or if a family member might be tormented by a demon. But definitely that is what we are going to do going forward. And so tonight, we are going to simply call this Season 1, Episode 1, the old format of the books, the saga of the struggle, and then some short stories woven in there, has kind of run its course. And so even though you might be tuning into this podcast and see several stories prior to Season 1, Episode 1, we're just going to call it a brand new start. And we'll leave the other content there, of course, but this is the start of the new and improved podcast, The Struggle Series, if that makes sense. So tonight, let's begin season 1, episode 1, with a story entitled The Enemy Within. Have you ever had the misfortune of seeing or interacting with a dysfunctional couple? Not the normal bickering or conflict that accidentally bleeds out in public. I'm talking about profound abuse, neglect, disrespect, or even worse. Or maybe the type of dysfunction that has progressed to the point where one party or both are on the verge of being utterly destroyed. Maybe you've been a witness to the methodical deconstruction of a human being at the hands of their spouse or significant other. Therapists would have a plethora of diagnoses to choose from in an effort to home in on the reasons for the dysfunction. That is, if the couple ever found their way to therapy at all. If the couple sought the help of a clergy member, they may hear scriptural references on biblical marriage and how the couple should strive to apply principles such as love, respect, the golden rule, and many others. If the couple has close friends or family, those loved ones may offer advice from their own previous experiences with the purpose of trying to help. Any and all of these aforementioned remedies may actually bring relief to most couples. But what if the problem is more than personality clashes? What if it's more than a couple just growing apart? What if the problem is more spiritual? What if one of the people involved in the relationship is under the influence, not of drugs or alcohol, although that may be part of it? What if one of the parties is under the influence of a demon? We often say things like, that person has changed, or he's not the same person I used to know. Rarely do we even consider that the reason that this couple, who were once madly in love, are now on the verge of destruction because of a demonic force with a sinister plan. Let's venture into the lives of a couple who were in the grip of a demonic entity. Lacey, I know you have about 30 minutes until you log off from work. I was wondering if you have a few minutes to talk. I have some ideas about maybe doing a spontaneous date night tonight. What do you think? How many times have I told you, Todd? Don't bother me when I'm working. Why can't you just do what I say? You're like a little puppy that can't get enough attention. Just give me 30 minutes and then we'll talk. Will that be okay with you? Todd passively agreed and walked out of the home office. He made his way to the primary bedroom and just collapsed on the bed. He had come home early with the intention of trying to have a breakthrough in his marriage. He had just read a new book from a Christian marriage counselor who seemed to have some great suggestions. This book was recommended by his pastor, whom he had confided in. Todd had been wounded by this pastor in the recent past. This pastor had been the one who facilitated premarital counseling with Todd and Lacey and had eventually officiated their wedding. When Todd first approached him, the pastor had blamed Todd and pointed out the many shortcomings that Todd had confessed in those initial sessions. Lacey had disclosed very little and had represented herself as a woman who was willing to overlook Todd's issues because she loved him. The pastor had reminded Todd of how amazing of a woman Lacey was and how lucky he was to have her. Todd wanted to explode. He had seen the way that the pastor looked at Lacey. He had also felt that Lacey had not been totally forthcoming about her issues, but he didn't care. He loved her, and besides, he considered premarital counseling to be a formality. Todd had taken his scolding from the pastor because he was willing to do whatever it took to save his marriage. He loved Lacey. He worked hard every day to make her happy. He took care of her as best he could. He cherished her and tried to give her everything she wanted and needed. Somehow, it didn't seem to be enough. Nothing he tried was working, but he did not want to give up. He had read in the book that he should try and recreate some of the romance that was experienced in the beginning. He had taken a long, methodical journey down memory lane searching for happier times. He had made reservations and wanted to surprise her in an effort to show her that he not only loved her, but knew her. Now he lay in the bed with tears streaming down his face. He cried uncontrollably as he felt the weight of her words. Why was she so mean? Why did she speak to him that way? Was he so bad, so annoying, that his very presence disgusted her? As he cried, he heard a voice in his head. It wasn't the normal self-talk that we all experience when we are processing information. It was an audible voice in his head. The voice was crystal clear. He had no doubt what he had heard. The voice said, "She deserves better than you. You're not good enough for her, and you know it." Todd felt the agony deep down in his soul. The words hit him in the most intimate of places. He had wondered about that very thing before. The voice seemed to confirm his worst suspicions. Maybe she treated him that way because she had settled for someone like him when she had deserved so much better. Todd was once a very dedicated Christian. He once had a very close relationship to God and felt like he could recognize his voice. Now, he felt so far from God that he couldn't distinguish God's voice from the others in his head. He thought to himself, "Was that you, God? Are you the one that told me this? Should I just leave and let her be happy?" The voice continued in a more forceful and blunt manner. The voice said, "Leaving is not enough. You should just kill yourself. You have caused her so much pain by simply being in her life. If you make it look like an accident, she can collect your life insurance and be happy. You can at least do that for her, can't you?" Todd thought he saw a shadow move from right to left in the room and disappear into the closet. It wasn't the first time he had seen this shadow figure. Well, he had seen something out of the corner of his eye, but this was different. This time, it was right in his field of vision. He felt a fear welling up inside of him. Was this a... Before he could form his thoughts, the bedroom door opened. It was Lacey. She shouted, "Okay, what do you want to talk about? Wait, are you crying? Why are you crying?" Todd was so confused. He was still trembling from the shadow figure that had just made itself known. Now he was being confronted for his emotions. He said, "Sorry, I just have a lot going on. I think I just saw something go into the closet. It was like a shadow or something." "Are you serious, Todd? Why are you crying? You're like a baby. This is like the 10th time in the last 2 months I've seen you with tears in your eyes. You need to man up. It's not attractive to be married to such a weak man." Todd could not get his bearings. He had just seen an entity move across the room and disappear into the closet. Now he was being called weak by his wife. He didn't know what to say. He sat stunned for a moment before he spoke softly. He said, "Lacey, I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anybody. I'm crying because it seems like no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to make you happy. I actually have plans for us tonight if you're willing to go. I want us to just go and have fun, relax, and enjoy each other's company. I don't want to fight with you. I'm not sure if I'm in the mood to go anywhere. Where are you going to take us? Remember when we had been dating for about 6 months and we decided to go to that really fancy steak place and then we took a walk down by the river? We stopped in that little ice cream place and sat in that back booth for about an hour and talked. Remember how the owner let us sample all the flavors? Then we stopped in that little coffee shop where that guy was playing guitar. He played that song that became our song, and we danced. We were like the only ones dancing, but we didn't care. Remember that?" Lacey did not speak, but he thought she might have de-escalated. He continued, "I called that ice cream place and asked him to save us that booth. He also agreed to let us try all the samples. He actually remembered us. I also found out that same artist is performing at that coffee shop. I sent him a DM and he's willing to play our song. What do you say? Let's just go out and have a little fun." Lacey sat in silence for a second. He saw her face soften as she said, "That was a really great night. We haven't done anything like that in a while." Todd felt a slight glimmer of hope. He had considered losing his temper when she first walked in the room. He was now glad that he had chose a gentler approach. Before he could revel in his choice, he saw the shadow move out of the closet as it seemed to disappear behind Lacey, who was still standing in the middle of the room. It made Todd jump to his feet as he moved around Lacey and looked out into the hallway. She shouted, "What are you doing?" He responded, "I thought I saw a shadow figure earlier. I just saw it again. I think it went behind you and out the door." When he moved back around to the front of her, he could see that look in her eyes. The softened facial features had been replaced with that look of contempt that she had on most days. Before he could finish his thought, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "What is wrong with you? Now you're seeing things? You're a mess. You cry all the time, and now you're schizophrenic or something? I can't handle this. Now do you see why I don't want to do anything with you? I can't even stand to be around you sometimes. You're not the man I married. You're becoming more and more worthless to me by the day." This touched a nerve inside of Todd, and he could no longer take the abuse. He was no longer interested in the soft approach. He felt a strong urge to defend himself. So that's what he did. He shouted, "Are you kidding me, Lacey? Do you actually think you are perfect and I'm the only problem in this relationship? I can assure you, you are not. You are a mean, nasty, neglectful wife who does nothing to save your marriage. The real question is, why are you still married to me? You obviously hate me, and yet you stay. It's like your only purpose is to destroy me. If you're so miserable, why don't you go?" Lacey looked at him with a devious smile and said, "Wow, I can't believe you would yell at me like that. I knew that date night speech was phony. Now I'm seeing the real you. I can tell you this angry side is not only a little terrifying, but it doesn't make me want to be with you." "Lacey, are you serious? You were just yelling at me earlier today, and even when you walked in the door, you actually called me a crybaby and weak as you were yelling at me. So let me get this straight. You can yell at me, but I can't yell at you." She looked at him straight in the eyes and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't yelling at you." The calmness that came over her when she said it was unsettling. He shouted, "You can't be serious. You yell at me almost every day. Get out of my face, Todd. Quit bothering me, Todd. Don't touch me, Todd. You're annoying me, Todd. Give me some space, Todd. Don't ask me where I'm going, Todd. It's none of your business, Todd. That is my life. Now that I decided to stand up for myself, you're trying to flip this on me?" Wow, look at you. Are you proud of yourself? Does it make you feel like a man to stand up for yourself, Todd? Does it make you feel good to yell at your wife? What would your father think? What would our pastor think? Hasn't he already told you to treat me better? I guess you not only don't listen to advice, but now you want to make up stories that I yell at you. We both know that I have rarely raised my voice to you, and when I have, it was because you were getting uncomfortably aggressive. I'm the one that has to stand up for myself." Todd was speechless. He had been so sure that he had accurately remembered each argument. He had even written in his journal and outlined every attempt to save his marriage. He had taken the time to write everything down so that he could find a way to bring peace. Now, for the first time, he was second guessing himself. Was it him? Was he too sensitive? Was he misreading Lacey's words and believing she was yelling when she wasn't? He lost all control of his emotions in that moment. He fell to the floor and began to weep uncontrollably. He had no ability to stop. He spent the last 3 years trying to save his marriage. He had tried everything. He had once upon a time been such a strong-willed, masculine man. Now he was a shell of himself. He had tried to talk to his friends, but they only made fun of him for being a baby. He had been told to man up. He had tried counseling, talking to a pastor, reading books, and even watching YouTube videos. He had failed. Now, he was lying on the floor, unable to move. He felt shame for being curled up in the fetal position on the floor, but he could not will himself to get up. That is when Lacey stood over him and said, "Oh my, I married a little girl. Are you really crying like a child on the floor?" As she was talking, he could hear the voice in his head. It said, "You've become a worthless human being. She deserves to be with the real man. That is definitely not you." He somehow was able to muster the energy to stand up. He felt the room starting to spin, but he did his best to stay standing. He had to get out of the room. He had to get some fresh air. He had to remove himself from the situation before he broke completely. As he gathered himself, Lacey shouted, "Since you've decided to show me your true colors here, I might as well tell you something you're not going to like. I've been talking to one of my coworkers. We've actually been on a couple of dates. He is a manly man, and that is what I want. I definitely don't want a little baby standing in front of me." Todd felt every last part of his sanity slip away. It wasn't just her words, it was the hate in her eyes. He felt his will to live ooze out of his body. In that moment, he gave up. He moved around her and headed for the door. She moved in front of him and blocked his path. She shouted, "Where are you going? Are you going to go find somewhere to cry? We need to talk, Todd." He had nothing left to give. He put his hand on her shoulder and shoved her out of the way. She exaggerated the shove and acted as if she almost fell. She said, "Did you just put your hands on me?" He didn't even listen. He made his way down the stairs, grabbed his keys off the key ring, and walked out to his truck. He backed out of the driveway as he tried to breathe. He just needed to be somewhere else. He drove to a grocery store parking lot and put the vehicle in park. It was then that he finally took a breath. He had no idea where he was going. His family had told him to try and make it work. They had told him that it was his duty as a Christian husband to make his marriage last. His pastor had a crush on Lacey and was not objective. His therapist had offered no help. He was on his own, and he knew it. He closed his eyes to pray, but the voice in his head was now louder than ever. It said, "Why would you pray to your God? He has given up on you. Can't you see that? You are worthless. You have failed as a husband and a man. Give up, Todd. Your life is over." Todd shouted, "God says he never gives up on us." The voice shouted, "Oh, I can prove it. Your God doesn't care. Would your God do this to you?" As the voice rang in his head, a police car pulled in front of his truck. Then another pulled up on the driver's side, blocking him in. Both officers exited the cars with guns drawn. Todd put his hands in the air. He was given instructions to shut the vehicle off and get out. He struggled to understand what was happening to him. It wasn't until the officer put the handcuffs on him that he felt a hint of revelation. It was confirmed when the officer said, "You're under arrest for domestic violence on your wife. You have the right to remain silent." As Todd listened to his Miranda rights, he faded into himself. Todd sat in the holding cell with a look of defeat on his face. Another man in the same cell said, "My God, dude, what happened to you?" Todd whispered, I don't know. I guess she called the cops. I honestly don't even care. Whatever happens, happens." The man, who was obviously a hardened criminal, said, "Just hang in there, dude. I can see that look on your face. Don't give up, man. It will get better." Just then, Todd was taken to his permanent cell. He would have to spend the night and see the judge in the morning. He didn't care. He just went to his bunk and fell into a deep sleep. Actually, it was the best sleep he had experienced in years. He woke up in the morning, saw the judge, and was released on a personal recognizance bond. He walked out of the jail and turned on his cell phone. He had 42 missed calls. He responded to none of them. He dialed up an Uber to take him back to his truck. When he got to the parking lot where his truck was parked, he pulled up the app and gave the driver a $1,000 tip. The driver said, "Sir, I think you made a mistake. Are you sure you meant to type in $1,000?" Todd said, "I've never been surer in my life." The driver thanked him over and over again. Todd just said, "Do you have a wife?" The driver said, "Yes, I do." Todd asked, "Is she good to you? I mean, honestly, is she a good wife?" The driver said, "Yes, she's amazing. I'm blessed." Todd said, "Good. You have no idea how blessed you are. Use that money to do something nice for her." With that, Todd walked away and climbed into his truck. He jumped on the freeway and accelerated. He pulled up his music app and found that special song. This was the song that he and Lacey deemed their song. He turned it up as loud as it would go. He smiled as he approached the tractor trailer on his right. He sped up just enough to get even with the wheels of the tractor. He smiled, knowing that the voice in his head had revealed the relief to his pain. He sang the chorus of the song at the top of his lungs. Then he turned the wheel to the right under the wheels of the tractor. Well, there you have it. Season 1, Episode 1, entitled The Enemy Within. Now, let's talk for a minute. Is this story a little bit disturbing? I think it is. I think it's going to get me a lot of heat from them hyper-religious Christians that don't want us talking about these types of subjects, but there's a method to the madness here, and I want you to hear my heart. As somebody who has sat with people who are under the influence of a demon, whether that be oppression or possession or whatever terms we want to use, I've spent a considerable amount of my life sitting with people who weren't believed by everybody else. And what I've learned is that not all demonic attacks look like the movies, as we said in the beginning of this podcast. Most of it is a lot more subtle until the very end when it becomes obvious. And by that time, the demonic activity has progressed to the point where somebody is literally being destroyed right in front of our eyes. But what we don't realize is in situations like this story, demons are involved. You see, I'm a psychologist, right? And I've sat on counseling couches with thousands of clients. And I don't say that to brag. I'm saying that to show you that I know maybe what I'm talking about. This story would be a classic diagnosis of a narcissistic woman. That's what psychologists would say. All the signs are there: lack of empathy, gaslighting, flipping the script, making you feel like you're the problem, keeping you just on the hook enough to make you still think there's hope, pulling you in just enough to push you away. So in this story, I would be considering narcissistic personality disorder with borderline features. That would be my consideration for a diagnosis if this was a psychology diagnosis. And I don't think many of my colleagues would disagree. They would say that's a good place to start. Of course, we would do testing and that type of thing. But that's what any psychologist who is listening to this story would say. He has a narcissistic wife. As a matter of fact, you could get on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, even Instagram or Facebook, and you'll find countless people who are pumping out content about narcissistic women. And a lot of the people pumping out the content are women. I'll be honest with you. I even saw a video the other day where a narcissistic woman was the person putting out the content. It was almost as if she was trying to heal herself by being honest about her cases in an effort to help herself, but also to help other women or other men who were dealing with women like her. I was actually impressed by it. Or somebody would hear this story and say, well, this man obviously maybe has a depressive disorder and he just doesn't know how to handle his relationship or his emotions. And maybe there's some truth to that. But hopefully you heard in the story that a demonic entity had been affecting this family for a long time. Now, you can say this woman may have had narcissistic tendencies when they got married, but as you read into the story a little bit, you can see that they were once upon a time in love. I'm talking about like cheesy Hallmark movie date nights, right? They're going to dinner and then to an ice cream place and to a coffee shop. I mean, those are dream come true type date nights. Now this woman hates him. She hates his existence. And the demon is working on him and his voice, led him away from God with his own voice that he can't distinguish whether it's God voice or his voice. And he doesn't even consider that it's a demon. Even when he sees the demon moving around his room at the end of this story and go behind her, he's so far removed from God that it doesn't dawn on him that she might be possessed. And the demon, through the woman, was set out to destroy him. And in this story, the demon won. I've often said this, and I'll say it 1,000 more times if you stick around. We see these tragedies on the television or in the news or on our phones, and rarely do we put together the possibility in our minds that there's a demon involved. You see a mass shooting, oh, crazy guy, or you put their political affiliation next to it. And maybe there's parts of that or all of that are true. But do we stop and say, also, there was a demon involved? How could somebody go into a school and murder several children? It doesn't even make sense to us, right? Well, it does to me if you say that this person was under the influence of a demon. Now, I get a lot of heat when I say stuff like that because people say, well, you're taking the responsibility off that person. No, I'm not. That person needs to face the swiftest and most severe justice that can be issued because what they did was so horrendous that there's not even words. We can't even put words to that type of behavior. That person needs to face whatever the strictest punishment in that state or that county can give them. But it doesn't mean that a demon wasn't involved. And if we can start to look at that, we can start to say maybe there's remedies there. You know, there's people putting out political content now that is dividing parties, right? Whether you're on the right side or the left side, there's people pumping out all this content causing infighting and such. People don't stop and think, is that demonic? I think some of it is. And so, what we're going to do in this podcast is we're going to pump out a couple of stories a month where we take real life situations and try to put it under the lens of, are demons involved? Now, some of you may say, oh, this is one of those guys that believes demons are behind everything. You know what my answer to that is? Demons are always influencing us. But I'm not trying to place blame on demons. I'm trying to place blame on us. I know I've done things that are unspeakable. I'm not a perfect person by any means. And I've done things where, you know, I've caused damage to my marriage, to churches I've worked at, to counseling agencies I've worked at, in my relationships, not because a demon made me do it, but because I chose to turn my back to God and follow the voice of the demon. That's not possession. That's me choosing the wrong thing when I knew the right thing. And all of us have done that. When we recognize that demons are always trying to lead us away from God, that's where we understand the severity of what a demon is trying to do to us. And it snaps our head back to God. You know, one of the things that I've told several clients, several parishioners, I mean, thousands and thousands of people in my life, doing the right thing is pretty obvious, and doing the wrong thing is pretty obvious. And how do I know that? Doing the right thing doesn't take thought, right? If you see a little kid out in the rain, freezing cold, there's nothing in you that says, you know, is helping this kid get to some warm, dry place so they can, you know, save their life. Is that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? Of course not. Most of us would run outside, bring the kid to the porch, get him some towels, some dry clothes, call the police. That would be instinctual. It would be like second nature to do, right? You may not bring the kid inside because that's inappropriate, but you definitely keep them on the porch, wrap them up in some warm blankets, and wait for the police to come and try to help, right? The paramedics, whoever you would call. Doing the wrong thing is what requires thought, because what you're doing is you're justifying your behavior. I always use the example: you work 40 hours a week, every 2 weeks, you get your paycheck. Do you ever have a thought that says, should I cash this? Is this the right thing to do? Of course not. You cash that check and you go pay your bills. You know that's the right thing to do. There's no thought to it. It's second nature. As a matter of fact, you look forward to that check coming. It's when you're trying to do the wrong thing that these internal dialogues become complicated, because what you're doing is you're trying to justify the wrong thing. That is all because a voice is calling to you, trying to lead you astray. It's trying to take you from the obviousness of what God wants for you in your life. This couple in this story, once upon a time, loved each other, but people listened to voices. The wife, who looks like the bad guy in this, and kind of is in a way, has listened to a voice so much that she has become hateful towards her husband. She's cheated on him and rubbed it in his face. She mocks him. There's an influence there. She chose it, however. And the guy isn't the superhero either. He isn't the total victim, because he was going to these people for help, and maybe there's some villainous, behaviors of the helpers too, but he stopped listening to the voice of God little by little. Is he the true victim of this story? Well, in a way, yes, but he's not innocent. And there's other things he could have done to get himself the help that he needed. And so, somewhere in this story, a demon convinced him that he was worthless, and the best thing for him to do was to kill himself and make it look like an accident so she could get the insurance money. That's what demons do. Can they possess us? Sure. Is the woman in this story possessed? More than likely, definitely, at least heavily influenced. But that's how demons destroy a marriage. Now, let's make this practical so we could wrap up this episode for season 1, episode 1. Have you ever had marital troubles? Put yourself in this little scenario that I've written today. Maybe you're not that severe, but have you ever found yourself just looking at your spouse with contempt, or, fighting, and you can't figure out where it's coming from? Stop. In that moment, say, is a demon trying to destroy my marriage? You know what the answer to that is? Yes. Demons are always trying to destroy your marriage. They're always trying to destroy the blessings that God has given you. That's when you take a breath and you pray. You recognize that the person who is talking to you is listening to the voice, and you're listening to the voice. Get yourselves to a place where you can pray together. Stop listening to the voices. Get in the Word. What does God say about how to respect each other and how to love each other? And if the helpers you go to don't give you help, don't give up, because they're also part of the demonic scheme. You never know if the pastor that day that you went to get help from had been visited by the demon that is tormenting you 20 minutes before you got there and got him in a bad mood. You never know if the therapist that you reached out to for help was influenced by the demon and has some sort of bias against men. And so you walked in the door and she attacked you and took the wife's side. You never know. But what you do know is God loves marriage. He designed it so we could have a helper, so we can have a partnership in this world to navigate it so that we can make it through. And it's also a type shadow of what will happen in heaven with the marriage supper of the Lamb. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll leave that as homework. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for being patient until we started pumping out some new content. I'm glad to be back. I feel rested. I feel, like we have some place to go here. And so that's what we're going to do. Just want to remind you that this podcast is written and produced by me, Anthony Corelli. This podcast is copyright The Struggle, LLC. If you'd like to find out more about us, you can visit us at thestruggleseries.com. That is our website. We'll be out doing some book stuff here in the next coming weeks, and so we'll try to pump some of that out into the show notes. If you happen to be in the Colorado area, that's where we're going to be through November. I think we have a couple of dates here in November. I'll put those out in the show notes, like I said. Just want to send a shout out to Todd Kazinka at Todd K Voiceovers for the amazing voiceover work and music he put together to make this show possible. We just want to remind you that God loves you, and may he bless you and bring you peace. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Struggle Series podcast. Please like, subscribe, and tell a friend. We will see you next time.